Hi guys, having covered an important trick to handle the complexity of any Java program through abstraction in the previous section, we will now shift our focus to another useful technique called exception handling. It is mainly used to detect various kind of errors as well as to perform a certain function in the output on the detection of certain error. Hence, in this section, we will be introduced to understand what an exceptions are, followed by the methodology of handling such exceptions, and subsequently we will learn of various mechanisms that are involved with exception handling. However, we will turn our attention to the theme of this video, which will be an understanding of exceptions. In this video, we will cover up two major topics, exceptions and their types. Let's start with exceptions. There are many a times when the entire code that you have written may be absolutely correct in the syntax, but still the desired output isn't achieved. Such an error occurs when Java recognizes the code as correct in the syntax, but it does not know how to perform the action. Such an error is known as exception. The primary difference between a syntax error and an exception is that an exception is not always fatal to the output, in the sense that it can be handled during the compilation of a program through certain special statements, about which we will learn in the subsequent videos of this section. Let's acquaint ourselves with a certain inbuilt exceptions to further of our understanding. Before that, let me give you a quick breakup of what are the types of exception that we'll go through. There are three types of exceptions. One, which we call check exceptions. Second, which we call uncheck exception. And third, we just call it as an error. There is a hierarchy, or I would say breakup, of how throwable mechanism or Java exceptions are. So throwable are coming down to two breakups. One which we call error and one we call exception. Exception further goes with runtime, IO exception and interrupt. We'll just try and stick to the very simple and basic understanding of exceptions through the simple three breakups that I have given as check, uncheck and error. Going further understanding of first starting with the check exceptions are inherent as throwable class excluding the runtime exceptions. Like when you say error which is known as check exceptions are usually IO exceptions, or you can say database based exceptions like SQL exceptions and etc. These exceptions can be validated only during the compiling or compile time. I would give you one of the exceptional example with a run program so that you can have a very better understanding how exceptions are actually thrown by the IDE. Uncheck exceptions are the most important ones because you only come up with uncheck exceptions during the runtime only. So arithmetic exceptions, null pointer exceptions are those once you run the program, that's when you are going to come across those exceptions. So let me give you a quick example with a program how exceptions are thrown by an IDE. So for your understanding, I have given a package name called exception in line 1, and then I have mentioned a public class to say unhandled exceptions to be thrown as class name. And then in directly as I have declared a public static main method or main program that we are declaring, under which int data is assigned as 100 and I'm going to divide it by 0. This is the code which is going to raise the exception, and I'm just going to print the system out print statement just to give you rest of the code, or you can write it anyhow, but we are just trying to focus it on the exception part, what the IDE is going to throw. Without wasting any more time, let's run this program and see what are the exceptions that the IDE is going to throw. We should get an arithmetic exception that because we are going to divide 100 by 0. So now that you can see on the console, exception in the thread main function is throwing up arithmetic exception because we are dividing a number by 0, which is not possible. So these kind of exceptions are unhandled exceptions. We are not controlling them, but after compiling the program, you get to know what kind of exceptions are we getting actually. Last but not the least, what we call errors, which are unrecoverable. you cannot do anything. So majorly, I cannot give you an example for it right away because I have to overload my system to give you certain kind of errors, which I have to work very hard to put a huge load on my system. So one of the most important part is when you run out of memory, your RAM is full and your Java program cannot take more RAM utilization. That is when the IDE throws you out of memory error. And virtual memory errors are those which when the JVM actually crashes. So no more stack utilization or heap utilization can be done and the complete compiler crashes. So that is when your IDE throws a virtual machine error. And there are a lot more, but these are the major ones that I've covered up in the slides.